Hello, I'm Tyson Hodgson. This is number 0855, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there. Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0855. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, Mark Leslie is back on the show talking about his new book called Haunted Hamilton. He'll share stories like the Tombstone Ghost, a haunting that took place for over a decade.
This woman wakes up in the middle of the night. She wakes up and sees this ghost with these deep sunken eyes and this long straggly hair, just the upper half of her body. And it looks like she's screaming and she's floating over her just a few feet above her on the bed. And then the woman screams and then the ghost takes off to this one corner of the room. And that keeps happening. And it's so freaky that they end up bringing in paranormal specialists from the US and exorcists and all kinds of like mediums and things like that. And they couldn't figure out what it was. And then 10 years later, they found a piece of tombstone in the building when they were collapsing it to build something else on that site.
Also back on the show is Brian Glow. We had him on the show a while ago talking about his anti-bullying advocacy, and we didn't get a chance to talk about his career as an international illusionist and comedy magician. So we'll do that this time.
I used to do very serious big illusions. It was pyrotechnics and explosions and fire and fog. As I was doing all this big theatrical magic, the best parts of the show were sometimes the smallest, funniest, and not the most amazing thing where I'm getting burned 30 feet in midair and reappearing at the back of an audience in an arena on a motorcycle. Whereas that was amazing and fabulous, the reactions for me doing something humorous were just as big and fit in my pocket.
Stuart Nulman is in with another edition of Book Banter.
Hi, I'm Stuart Nulman, and Book Banter starts 2026 with a look at the final days of Marilyn Monroe, courtesy of James Patterson. So say goodbye to Norma Jean later on the Stuff File program.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thoughts, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guests later. The person who told you this was show number 0855 was Tyson Hodgson, who is a video editor and an all-around nice guy. Thank you very much, Tyson, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Joe Hayden, a fourth-generation dairy farmer supplying milk for Bailey's Irish Cream, uses the Herd Plus app to find perfect mates for his 230 cows. The Tinder for Cows technology, developed by the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, matches animals based on ancestry, weight, fertility, and milk production data. Well, that could sound suspiciously like some of the low-rent human dating apps. Said Hayden, like every other industry, technology is transforming dairy farming. We use this app, which matches each cow with the right bull so that we can breed even better ones in the future. His family farm in Tinahely County, Wicklow, has supplied Diageo since Bailey's launched in 1974. Hayden breeds only his top 80 cows yearly using artificial insemination. I wonder if that involves Bailey's too.
Bailey's.
Let your senses guide you.
Speaking of cows, Missouri authorities summoned cowboys on December the 10th after a collision between two tractor-trailers on Interstate 70 in Oak Grove released 13 cattle onto the highway. The Missouri Highway Patrol confirmed the crash caused the bovines to escape from one truck, prompting officials to contact B&W Land and Cattle from Butler for assistance.
Keep moving, 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 though they're disapproving. Keep them doggies moving right. Don't try to understand them, just rope and throw and brand them. Soon we'll be living high and wide.
Cowboy Colby Booze explained the challenge, saying, "We like to help out the ones in need. It's always a challenge because you never know where they're at, or how they're going to be, or if they're going to be mad and want to fight you. You don't know." The crew successfully captured all escaped cattle. Both truck drivers escaped injury in the incident. Good to hear. This could have been an utter catastrophe.
Move 'em on, hit 'em up, move 'em on, hit 'em up, rawhide. Cut 'em out, ride 'em in, cut 'em out, ride 'em in, rawhide.
A juvenile took a joyride to Santa's Land on Boxing Day in Putney, Vermont. State police say the kid took their family car and tried to drive to the small amusement park in southern Vermont. No one was hurt and no one will face charges. Police did not reveal any more details because of the suspect's age. I'm guessing he definitely made one of Santa's 2 lists.
He's on the naughty list.
A United Airlines flight from Dallas, Texas to Chicago, Illinois was diverted to St. Louis, Missouri because of a bomb threat. A passenger claimed there was an explosive device on the aircraft. Specifically, he allegedly said a bomb was in his wife's luggage. Sniffer dogs in St. Louis swept the plane and found no bombs. The flight was allowed to continue to Chicago, minus the passenger who'd allegedly made the threat, who was arrested. So, there was no bomb. But I'm going out on a limb to say that this marriage has already crashed and burned. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, Erica Rothenbuehler was charged with felony theft after taking 6 children's toys worth $48 from under a Christmas tree at a St. Petersburg Red Roof Inn on Christmas morning. Whoa, you're a mean one, Mrs. Grinch.
You really are a heel. You're as cuddly as a cactus. You're as charming as an eel.
Hotel security footage shows the 44-year-old entered the lobby and began looking under the tree before taking the presents and leaving. Police later found Rothenbuehler, who made spontaneous statements saying that she thought the gifts were for the kids in the building, according to the arrest report. Officers noted she doesn't have any children. The theft charge was elevated from misdemeanor to felony due to Rothenbuehler's previous convictions for stealing from a Winn-Dixie supermarket and Wawa convenience store. She remains in county jail on $5,000 bond and faces up to 5 years in prison if convicted of the 3rd-degree felony. Well, if she gets jail time, I don't think her heart is going to grow any bigger.
Your heart's an empty hole.
And let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Mark Leslie is back on the show. We had him on 5 years ago when he talked about his novel Fear and Longing in Los Angeles. That was on show number 0605. This time around, he's here to talk about his latest book, a non-fiction title called Haunted Hamilton. Mark joins us from Waterloo, Ontario via Riverside.com. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Peter. Great to be back. Oh, my God. It's been that long, has it?
Yes, it has. And I thank you for being back on the program with us. Now, the last time we talked about a book of yours, it was a fiction, a novel. But this is a nonfiction story, and it's not the first foray for you into the paranormal world.
No, I for some reason I found myself fascinated by the darkness, whether it was fiction I made up or whether I was doing research. So it's kind of like the two different, well, one of the two different, one of the 3 or 4 different hats that Mark Leslie wears as a writer of the macabre.
So what led you to not only Haunted Hamilton, but other things that you have done in the paranormal world before?
So I grew up afraid of the dark. I grew up afraid of the monster under my bed, the one in my closet, all of those things. And when I first moved to Hamilton, Ontario, one of the things I did to try to get to know the city, which is a place where my wife at the time was from, I went on ghost walks because I find going on a local historic ghost walk is a great way to get to know the city. And I was so fascinated with the ghost walks of places like Ottawa and Hamilton and various cities that I've traveled to, that I thought, being a book nerd, a reader, and of course a writer, I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a book of this? So I mentioned that to the folks who were running Haunted Hamilton at the time, and now it's 2 separate walking groups. But I said, you guys, you got some great stories here. You should consider doing a book. And they said, well, we're too busy running the tours, but if you want to write a book, we'll give you access to our files. And the light bulb went off in my head. I work in the book industry. I also happen to know of a publisher that was interested in such a book. And I went, aha, all the stars are aligned. And that's how it all started.
Okay, I want to go back a little bit because you say you're someone who was afraid of the dark and afraid of what was under your bed.
Yeah.
How did you reach the point where you said, I'm going to go on haunted tours?
Yeah, I know it's really funny, but maybe it's like, I'm afraid of heights too, but a roller coaster is kind of fun because that adrenaline rush. And I think the thing about those fears is I know better, in the rational time of daylight, I know, well, I hope there's no monsters in the shadows, but that fear is so powerful and so lingering. And I think there's some sort of adrenaline rush. And one of the things, as a writer who makes up scary stories but also shares them, is one of the great things about communicating that in the pages of a book is the person who's really scared has control. They can close the book, they can put it down, they can do something else. And similarly, as a writer, we can control the narrative. The good guys can win. Good can triumph over evil. The monsters can be vanquished. And so I think I was drawn to this because maybe it was a form of therapy, but it allowed me to have a little bit more control over those fears by guiding them and funneling them into words. And then maybe it's a misery loves company thing, but if I can get other people scared with me, I'm not the only scared one in the room. I don't know. But I honestly think therapy has something to do with it somewhere in there.
Well, you're a far more rational person than I am, and the reason why I say that is you're afraid of heights, you're afraid of monsters. I'm afraid of water, and I will not get on a boat.
Really?
If my life depended on it.
Wow. Well, I mean, getting out of the water and into a boat probably would be a good reason to get into a boat.
Well, no. The idea of me being in the water, I'm not that close to water.
Gotcha.
And people often say, well, you live on Montreal. It's an island. And I say, it's only an island when you're off it.
That's right. That's right.
So tell me some of the things that we can find in Haunted Hamilton.
So what's really funny is one of the first stories I wrote for that book goes back to Alexander Hamilton poem about the Dark Lady of the Customs House. And not only did I learn about that through the poem, which was related to this very historic building that has it's transcended all the changes that Hamilton has had. Now, as a Canadian, you probably think of Hamilton as Steel Town. But when I was researching about the Customs House, I learned that it had been a textile town well before it was a steel town. So it has gone through various personas and ways that it was known. But I also learned, interestingly enough, there is a line that says, "and a peeler who saw her." And I was like, what the heck is that? Like I've heard that term used in a place that gentlemen in quotes might frequent to see people take their clothes off. But I learned that the term peeler was a historic term that was used for police officers, and it was based on Sir Robert Peel. And that's where also the term Bobby comes from. So here's the cool thing about writing a ghost story book is you don't just learn about the cool ghosts of the city. You learn some of the history of the people, the places, but you even learn other cool things like Sir Robert Peel, like even the Canadian police who subscribe to much of his philosophy and writing still to this day. And that's where we get the term Bobby from for, police officers in the UK. And that's where the term peeler, which is not in common use anymore, that's where it comes from. So again, you do a book of ghost stories and you're really touching upon a lot of different elements.
Doing the research for Haunted Hamilton, what was the thing that really caught your eye as far as paranormal activity was concerned?
I think one of them was this story about this tombstone. I called it the Tombstone Ghost, and it was a story I had read in the Hamilton Spectator as part of my research. And it was a really cool story that actually takes place over a decade of this haunting that happens in this apartment. This woman wakes up in the middle of the night and she wakes up and sees this ghost with these deep sunken eyes and this long straggly hair, just the upper half of her body. And it looks like she's screaming and she's floating over her just a few feet above her on the bed. And then the woman screams and then the ghost takes off to this one corner of the room. And that keeps happening. And it's so freaky that they end up bringing in paranormal specialists from the US and exorcists and all kinds of like mediums and things like that. And they couldn't figure out what it was. And then 10 years later, they found a piece of tombstone in the building when they were collapsing it to build something else on that site. And they even followed the progression of the story of the gentleman who had shared the story. That's one of the stories that stuck with me because it wasn't just a one-off spooky, ghostly thing. This was something that happened over time and is documented in the daily newspaper as well. In relatively recent times, we're talking about the 70s and the 80s here when these stories took place. But I'm thinking that's one of the things that I found most fascinating is it's not just this moment in time and a weird thing that happened. It's the history that happens in that location over time.
You yourself believe in ghosts or the paranormal world?
I do. I believe, as Hamlet said, that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophies, dear Horatio. So yes, I do.
Does it quell your fears when you do the research for books like this?
Sometimes I get scared. I was working on a book recently and it was late at night and my wife was in the other room reading and she was adjusting. We have the connected house. So she went to adjust the light in the bedroom and accidentally adjusted the light in the den. And I let out a scream because I was so into the chapter of the book I was writing. Yes, I get scared. But I think there's also a power to it as well. I think there's also something that really significant that allows me, I don't know, it allows me, like I said, that sort of control when I'm working on that. So yes, I get into it. Yes, I get scared, but that also tells me if I'm scared and I'm nervous and trepidatious as I'm writing a chapter or researching a chapter, that's probably going to translate to the reader having that same feeling. And why do we write and do storytelling? So people feel things. And so it's like, well, if I'm scared, I bet you other people might be too.
This is not your first foray into the paranormal world, so do you have other ideas and other titles and other regions that you want to check into?
Oh, for sure.
In your next several books?
You know what? I have a list of things I'm working on. One of them is haunted objects. One that I just turned into a Hamilton publisher just a couple weeks ago was the Ghost Stories of the Great Lakes. And oh my God, speaking of water, I mean, it was so fascinating. That was an absolute treat to work on. And I have other locations, bars and breweries and stuff like that. Like I have an endless list of places I really want to write about.
Maybe you can answer this question in one of your future books. I mean, the fact that when a house is haunted, it's usually because someone died there. And my feeling is, shouldn't the most haunted places in the world be hospitals?
100%. And I did actually release a book I co-authored with Rhonda Parrish called Haunted Hospitals. And that's one of the conclusions we came to. This is a place where people come into and go out of the world. If there is any portal between our world and the other world, the afterlife, the before life, any of those spiritual areas, that a hospital is, you're right, probably one of the most haunted kinds of buildings we could have.
The current book is called Haunted Hamilton. It's out now. Mark, it's a pleasure to have you on the program once again to share the story with us. And by the way, don't wait 5 years to be on the program again.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter. I'll be sure to reach out to you just around the time that Ghost Stories of the Great Lakes is coming out.
Great. Looking forward to it, sir.
Thank you.
Mark Leslie, author of Haunted Hamilton. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0855, and you'll find the link to Mark's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
What's it called when a snowman throws a tantrum? A meltdown!
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestufffileprogram program.
It's garbage day. You're out enjoying your daily walk when you come upon two children rummaging through a recycling bin. One of them catches your eye. You look away. Are you empathetic or apathetic? Don't let homelessness assumptions get in the way of homelessness solutions. Go to CanadaCanDoIt.ca. Help the Canadian Alliance to end homelessness.
Here's a penny for your thoughts from the Stuff File program, coming to you from Montreal, Canada, a country that doesn't have pennies.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to Brian Glow, the international illusionist and comedy magician. Plus, Stuart Nulman is along with another edition of Book Banter. We also have a morning shower thought and, of course, an idiot of the day and much more in Stuff File News right here, right now. Here's an update to a story we shared a couple of years ago. Arkansas couple, 22-year-old Darian Urban and 21-year-old Shailene Ehlers, learned their different fates when they were sentenced after trying to sell their baby for a six-pack of beer to a man at a campground. Urban pleaded guilty to one count of attempted accepting compensation for adoption during a hearing on December 22nd. In exchange for his guilty plea, prosecutors dropped one count of endangering the welfare of a minor. Meanwhile, Benton County Circuit Judge Brad Caron accepted the plea agreement and sentenced Urban to serve 3 years in the Arkansas Department of Corrections with an additional 3-year suspended sentence. Meanwhile, Ehlers pleaded guilty to the same 2 counts. Following her plea, the judge ordered for Ehlers to be placed on state-supervised probation for 6 years. The sentencing means that Ehlers could end up with no criminal record if she completes the probation without issue. Urban may have received a more severe punishment due to his prior legal trouble in Arkansas. Back in June of 2023, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of theft by receiving stolen goods that were valued between $1,000 and $5,000. He was placed on probation and he violated the terms when he tried to sell his child. The couple attempted to sell their baby in September of 2024, and they even drew up a contract for the deal. Once the campground owner learned about the attempted transaction, he called 911, and the baby boy, who allegedly showed signs of neglect, was taken to a hospital. Neither Urban nor Ehlers are allowed to contact their son as part of their plea agreements. After trying to sell their baby for beer and looking at their mugshots, that kid is going to grow up fearing what will befall him in life just based on his gene pool. Yeah. In Martin County, Florida, 63-year-old Stephen Pavlik, a Salvation Army bell ringer, has been arrested for attempting to impale a Publix grocery store manager with his kettle tripod. Pavlik was hired to collect donations during the holiday season, but instead created a disturbance outside the store. Witnesses say he was intoxicated while on duty, confronting and disturbing customers who passed by. The situation escalated when the Publix manager approached Pavlik to address his behavior. In a violent outburst, Pavlik attempted to assault and impale the manager with a donation kettle tripod, fortunately missing his target and not causing injury. After fleeing the scene, deputies later found Pavlik at his residence. He was taken into custody without further incident and subsequently transported to the Martin County Jail. I guess his bell-ringing days are over. I also think the Salvation Army has to work a little harder in checking the background of their volunteers. Otherwise,
it's a missed donation opportunity for the Salvation Army. Just 2 hours of your time as a volunteer bell ringer this holiday season will help us provide more than food and shelter all year.
And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, a late-night drive-through Lawrence County turned into multiple charges after wildlife officers stopped a vehicle they say was involved in illegal deer hunting. According to the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, officers pulled a vehicle over on December 13th after seeing a passenger repeatedly shine a light across agricultural fields from the roadway. During the stop, officers reported smelling alcohol coming from the vehicle and found several open containers inside. Officers also discovered multiple weapons, including rifles, pistols, and a shotgun. The driver was screened and arrested on a DUI charge. Both the driver and passenger now face charges for hunting deer at night, hunting from a public road, hunting from a motor vehicle, and having open containers of alcohol in the car. Boy, if they had illegal cigarettes, that would cover all of the Agency of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And by the way, I've always thought that was a weird grouping. Anyway, also, drinking and hunting or fishing is not a good idea, and it might get you the attention of Jeff Foxworthy.
If you've ever been too drunk to fish, you might be a redneck.
And let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Back in August of last year, we had Brian Glow on the show. He's a successful international illusionist and comedy magician. Well, back on that show, we spent most of the time talking about the fact that he is also an anti-bullying and suicide awareness advocate who shares his message with youths. We spent so much time that we didn't get any time to talk about his actual career. So we're doing that now. Brian joins us from Winnipeg via Riverside.com. Brian, nice to have you back.
Thanks, Peter. Great to be here.
One of the things that I find rather interesting, awe-inspiring, is the fact that as a performer, you have traveled to 45 countries. There are diplomats who haven't been to 45 countries.
Well, 45 is what I remember, and that keeps coming up as we continue to tour, and I have not stopped, and after 60 years of doing magic, I see no end to it.
What was the first country you went to, and what was the first, shall we say, exotic place that you said, oh, I've really made it?
So the very first place I started was outside of Canada was the United States, obviously, because we're neighbors. But I started my touring career internationally quite young. In 1977, I had the opportunity to perform for 4.5 months in Kenya, Africa, in a casino in Nairobi. And that was pure happenstance by meeting an agent in Saskatoon who said, oh, I'm going to Africa because my father's becoming the Dean of Economics from the University of Nairobi. And I said, if you can ever get me a show. And that's all it took. This is pre-internet, so letters ensued, and then off I went later that year in May. And from there went to England, Scotland, and Greece, then came back to Canada. I finished off 3 degrees and kept touring, and it's just been like that. My first really big Canadian tour was in 1974, and I was traveling with a show called Uncle Harry's Good Time Traveling Medicine Show, which was a new age vaudeville show with Peter Paul Van Camp doing comedy poetry, Kathy Fink and Duck Donald doing bluegrass music, and myself doing magic, mind reading, and escapes, billed as Canada's youngest professional magician. So, but
How old were you back then?
Well, when I turned full-time pro, that's 1973. I was working in restaurants doing magic between the soup and salad. So let's see. I was born in 57, so you can figure it out. I was like 16, I think, when I started in the restaurants. And then just after that we went coast to coast to coast with 120 shows in 58 days. And I knew this is what I was doing for the rest of my life. I've never not been a magician. That's all I've ever done my entire life.
The title, as I mentioned in the introduction, is International Illusionist and Comedy Magician. When people think of magicians, they often think of comedy. So why the word comedy there? It almost seems redundant.
I do not find most magicians funny. Comedy magic is a very particular kind of performance style where, like comedians, we're going for laughs per minute, but using as comics would hate, we'd be prop comics or something like that in their minds. But I do magic illusions that are funny. I used to do very serious big illusions. We had 22 dancers and technicians in the show, 3 semis, a bus, and it was rock and roll magic show. I mean, it was big. It was pyrotechnics and explosions and fire and fog. As I was doing all this big theatrical magic, the best parts of the show were sometimes the smallest, funniest, and not the most amazing thing where I'm getting burned 30 feet in midair and reappearing at the back of an audience in an arena on a motorcycle. Whereas that was amazing and fabulous, the reactions, for me doing something humorous were just as big and fit in my pocket.
So how did little Brian Glow become a magician in the first place? I mean, you mentioned the fact that you started doing this as a business when you were just 16. How did you get the magician or illusionist bug?
Well, that's interesting because I was, probably 6, 7 years old. We were Sunday night fans of Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan was the greatest variety show that ever was and ever will be. I mean, they had the introduction of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Elvis. They had magicians, jugglers, fire readers, comedians, singers, everything. And it wasn't a contest like an AGT, American's Got Talent. It was, you were famous or you were great, and they either discovered you or brought you on just because you were very well known. So you were guaranteed to know that whatever was going to be on Ed's show was going to be the best of the best of the best. And I saw these magicians doing, producing birds and scarves that changed into different colors and, would produce handfuls of cards out of thin air. And it was jaw-dropped amazing. And, I go to my mom and dad and say, well, how did he do that? And they go, I don't know. And I thought, my parents don't know? And then it was incredible. And 1965, there was in Winnipeg, a brand new library was built in our area of West Kildonan in Winnipeg. And I went to that library, and sure enough, there was two and only two books on magic. One of them was a biography of Houdini and talked all about his fabulous escapes and didn't tell how to do them, just all about Houdini, which was quite fascinating because I really wanted to emulate that, even at 8 years old. And the other was a book called Magic of the World by John Mulholland, and it was a book where each trick, now this is a book written for kids to learn how to do tricks, each trick came from a different country. And that instantly fascinated me. So there was a trick from Japan, there was a trick from India, there was a trick from North America, and as I learned each one of these tricks, I couldn't believe how simple they were, yet how amazing the effect was on people. Because once you did it, they'd look at you like you could walk on water. It was incredible. Here I'm 8 years old doing my very first magic show at my own birthday party, muddling through card tricks and different things that I'd learned from the book. I mean, that book was my first show. But to tell you how good those little illusions were, I was doing a show for a monetary conference in New York where Bank of America was one of our sponsors. And one of the messaging they were trying to get a hold, because a lot of what I do in corporate magic, which is my mainstay, is getting messages across to people using magic. And they were talking about how China was taking over in the credit industry and how 50% of everything was being split off. And they wanted me to illustrate that. And here I'm doing a trick for 2,600 people on video camera, on giant screens, showing them this trick I learned when I was 7 years old and still killing. But the way the messaging went on, it followed, the trick itself was there were 6 coins on a piece of cardboard that were, a handkerchief was folded up so the 4 corners formed a little pocket, and I dumped the coins into the pocket, and I wanted to show them that I wasn't doing any sleight of hand, so we kept them at arm's length by putting them on a piece of cardboard. The head of the banking system that from New York was there, and he was holding the cloth, and I took out a silver cord and tied it together to form a circle and tapped the bag, and suddenly 3 Chinese coins that had, of the 6 that were dumped into the napkin, were now threaded onto the string, and the other 3 were left inside the piece of cloth. And with, again, the illustration of all the points talking about how the 50% was being taken away, everybody got it. They got the message loud and clear that they've got to catch up to this country or they're in dire straits. Again, this is a trick from a book from 1965 at me at 7 years old learning how to do it, and then now presenting it 20 years later or 30 years later or whatever it was to quite effect.
One of the things that I introduced you as, again, as I said, an international illusionist and comedy magician, but you are also a world-class illusion architect. So you've created events or I wouldn't say tricks, but illusions for other people. How did that start for you?
Funny enough, I have always been very creative in terms of taking something that I like and trying to make it my own. And sometimes it was a small trick that I wanted to make into a larger stage trick or an illusion, something that was massive. The first time I remember, I was quite young. This is, early 70s. And I had met the producer of the World Silver Broom, the curling championship that was this year going to be held in Winnipeg. And this was all the international teams from around the world were coming for this massive curling championship. I had been telling him that, wouldn't it be amazing if you can imagine taking a curling broom and having a couple of them and having someone put their arms over that, and then they were standing on a little stool and you pulled the stool away from them. They were balancing on 2 brooms, and then you pull one of the brooms away and they were hanging there in midair, and then take them and put them on at 45 and then 90 degrees so that they were floating parallel to the ice. And then how about if we had someone get into a box that was lifted high into the air, and if you're at an arena, so it can go up 30, 40, 50 feet. and have it explode, fall apart, and have the person appear on a Zamboni. And he said, "You can do that?" And I said, "Oh, of course I can." I had no idea how to do it. So I talked myself into this massive event, and now I had to come clean and figure out how to do that. And that sort of was how I approached things when I was younger, more gumption than brains, but it worked. And I went on to design work for the Lyric Opera of Chicago and the Met and Munich Opera and the Spoleto Festival in Italy and then other magicians, of course. And I did a show with symphonies, and I did a lot of theater work. I worked with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. I worked with Manitoba Theatre Centre and then other theaters across the world. And it just grew and grew and grew until that was part of the thing I did was create theatrical magic.
And as the saying goes, the rest is history. Again, Brian, it's really a pleasure to have you on the program with us. And I'm amazed at the fact that I was able to corner you because, again, you travel all the time. So congratulations on the success of your career. And thank you once again for being on the program with us.
I'd love it. Thank you so much. I hope we'll speak again soon.
Brian Glow, international illusionist and comedy magician. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0855, and you'll find the link to Brian's site. Again, you can also hear his past interview where he talks about his work as an anti-bullying and suicide awareness advocate. That's on show number 0837. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
Attractive doctors and nurses probably never get accurate pulse readings from their patients.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestuffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestuffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here are two of the many glowing reviews that Michael Liebling has received for his novel The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. Arabella magazine says,
I couldn't put it down. I want more books like this, and I want more books written by Michael Liebling.
Best-selling author Nicholas Kaufman says,
The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife is sharp, funny, thrilling, and endlessly original.
The only unsolved mystery here is why you haven't read it yet. The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife is available wherever you find books.
From our studios in Montreal, Canada, and going out to the rest of the world, this is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's time to crack a spine. The Stuff File presents Book Banter with Stuart Nulman. Once again, here's Peter Anthony Holder.
Here we are for the first Book Banter of 2026. Hello, Stu.
Hello, Peter. You know what? I was thinking of taking old books and shredding them and making confetti for New Year's Eve, but that's too sacrilege. I couldn't do that. But yes, Happy New Year, Peter.
Happy New Year to you too, sir. And what do we have for our first book of the brand new year?
Well, we're going to look for this first edition of Book Banter for the year 2026 with Marilyn Monroe, because this year, Peter, marks the 100th anniversary of the birth of Miss Monroe. You know, she's one of the most iconic sex symbols of the silver screen. She will always be remembered for her performances in such classic movies as Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, How to Marry a Millionaire, The 7-Year Itch, and Some Like It Hot. However, she is also remembered for her difficult life off-screen, which was filled with heartbreak, unpredictable behavior, insecurity, family dysfunction, and addiction. And you know what? Joshua Logan, who directed Marilyn in the 1956 drama Bus Stop, summed it up pretty succinctly when he said, and I quote, "I doubt if she had 2 consecutive days' happiness in her entire life," unquote.
Wow.
Yeah. But mega best-selling author James Patterson, along with Imogene Edwards Jones, he has once again dabbled into the nonfiction genre with his latest effort called The Last Days of Marilyn Monroe. Now, this book is billed as a true crime thriller. But before the authors get to that aspect of the book, they tell the story of how Norma Jean Mortensen transformed into Marilyn Monroe and her bumpy road to stardom thanks to the Hollywood studio system, which, was a system that also broke her physically and mentally. And there's, of course, the major events of Marilyn's life and career that are covered in the book, like the cameos in Love Happy, The Asphalt Jungle, and All About Eve that launched her movie career. The famous nude calendar photo that Playboy later bought the rights to was featured in their very first issue and sold out. The abortive marriages to Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller, and the addiction to pills and booze, not to mention her constant tardiness to film sets and special events that practically harmed her career. Now, as well, there's a focus on Marilyn Monroe beyond the dumb blonde sex symbol image. Her insights to her life and career in particular, and showbiz in general, which are mentioned quite frequently in the book, displays her intelligence and ability to take stock of her situation with a great degree of perspective. And the creation of her own production company proved that she could be a player in the industry and control which property she wanted to film and what kind of salary she could deservedly command. Now, the true crime thriller part comes in towards the end of the book, particularly her alleged affairs with both John and Robert Kennedy. That's when the allegations arose from that Marilyn's untimely death was not due to an overdose of her collection of pills on August 6, 1962, but as a covert government plot to eliminate her. That was due to her rants to a couple of her longtime friends, including veteran reporter Robert Slatzer, that she had a red notebook filled with information that she jotted down about her affairs with the Kennedys, as well as confidential information that she was privy to, and threatened to expose all of it to the press. Now, The Last Days of Marilyn Monroe may not offer to those classic movie buffs who might have read previous Monroe biographies by Norman Mailer, Donald Spoto, and Anthony Summers anything new that they haven't read about before. However, for those who come from the generations that only know Marilyn from her image on a whole bunch of merchandise, this book serves as a fine introduction to an original yet troubled actress and movie star, and why she lived her life, to quote Elton John, like a candle in the wind.
You mentioned the Josh Logan quote, but in reality, in this book, do you have any inkling that she had at least some time of happiness?
There are there's not that many. Not that many. I think she was more happy when she was, with some of her friends. When she was with her coaches, with the Strasbergs, Lee Strasberg and his wife. She was a big fan of Strasberg's daughter Susan, and was a big supporter when she starred in The Diary of Anne Frank on Broadway. But there wasn't much happiness, when you read the book. She was she was like she could, turn on the charm, and like she was like, turn on the public Marilyn, and then, and be happy and carefree and, always, accommodating to the press. And then afterwards, when the lights turned out, she turned on her private switch, and, a lot of trouble, a lot of insecurity.
Now, it sounds very, very similar, unfortunately, to the story of Jane Mansfield.
Yeah, that's right. They were, basically victims of the system, Hollywood tried to put them into one type of, stereotype, and they didn't want it. I mean, Jane Mansfield was a talented violinist.
Exactly. And both of them were very, very intelligent, but they only got to play, for lack of a better term, dumb blondes.
Yeah. But it was, I think she shed that image with her last completed film, The Misfits, which was written by her then husband, Arthur Miller, and which her production company chose to be a later project. So she chose that that film to do. And look, the cast that she had with her, Clark Gable, which was also his final film, Montgomery Clift and Eli Wallach, and Thelma Ritter also. So, she had a bit of control there.
Anyway, this week's book is?
It's called The Last Days of Marilyn Monroe by James Patterson and Imogene Edwards Jones. It's published by Little Brown, and it's $42.
And what other books do you recommend within this genre?
Well, two Marilyn Monroe biographies, by which I just mentioned just a few minutes ago. Norman Mailer's 1973 biography called Marilyn, and which actually brought the story of Marilyn Monroe to a new generation of readers. In fact, it was a cover story in Time magazine when it was released in 1973. And also Goddess by Anthony Summers, which started those conspiracy theories that Marilyn Monroe didn't die from an accidental overdose. And don't forget, he was the one who did books about the Kennedy assassination, and also wrote the book about J. Edgar Hoover that gave the allegation that he liked to dress up in women's clothes.
Yes.
So you pick and judge for yourself. But those are two of my recommendations.
Now I can't get the picture of J. Edgar Hoover in a strapless gown out of my head. Thank you very much, Stuart.
Okay. Well, maybe if just to soften the blow, maybe you could hear him do a speech about communism or being a gangster buster during the 30s. Maybe that'll soften it.
Yeah, but will he be doing it in a strapless gown?
Well, we hope a charcoal gray business suit. Well, you may never know.
Anyway, this week's book is
The Last Days of Marilyn Monroe by James Patterson and Imogene Edwards Jones, published by Little Brown, and it's $42.
And how can we find you, sir?
Well, not somewhere in Hollywood right now, but in the pages of the Montreal Times, mtltimes.ca, or my blog, stuartnulmansgrapevine.wordpress.com, and sometimes on Substack as well.
Thank you very much once again.
Well, you're welcome, Peter. Remember, diamonds are indeed a girl's best friend.
Stuart Nulman with another edition of Book Banter here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
The Stuff File.
And we're just about a racetrack for this edition of the Stuff File program. We do have a few more Stuff File news stories and, of course, an Idiot of the Day coming your way. So let's get right back to it right here, right now. On December 29th, Altoona, Pennsylvania police arrested 41-year-old Dwight Gray Jr. after he allegedly threatened a utility worker and attempted to steal his truck with the victim still inside the bucket. Gray allegedly approached the worker's vehicle and attempted to rob the victim. Gray reportedly instructed the victim to exit the bucket and empty his pockets. When the worker refused, Gray allegedly threatened the man, telling him that he would empty the clip on him. Officers say that is when Gray then reportedly tried to enter the truck and drive away, with the worker still suspended midair in the bucket. Gray was unable to move the truck and then allegedly proceeded to climb approximately halfway up the bucket before descending back to the ground and fleeing in an SUV. Officers later located Gray's vehicle and attempted a traffic stop. While doing so, Gray reportedly exited his vehicle and approached the officers while making claims of harassment. Officials say Gray was found to be under the influence, quelle surprise, and was taken into custody without further incident. He is jailed on a variety of charges, headlined by felonies for aggravated assault, terroristic threats, and reckless endangerment. Oh, he has a whole new set of things on his bucket list. A Florida man was arrested for allegedly committing an armed robbery at a meat market wearing nothing but a mask. Officers of the Lake City Police Department responded to an armed robbery at a BJ's Meat Market in Lake City. Well, that's an unfortunate name. On December the 30th, employees showed police the surveillance video and told them that a man entered the store completely naked except with a mask covering his face and with a piece of cloth wrapped around an object in his hand that they believed was some sort of weapon. The robbery suspect broke into a cash box and, despite his lack of pockets, took more than $1,000 from the store before he ran away. I wonder where he put it. No one was hurt during the robbery. Cops set up a perimeter and arrested 25-year-old Kobe Latre Watkins. Police also said they found evidence they believe to be connected to the crime. Watson was taken to a local hospital for a medical evaluation, in other words, a checkup from the neck up, and booked into jail. He is facing charges of armed robbery, exposure of sexual organs, grand theft, and criminal mischief. Well, I hope he's not naked at his trial. Otherwise, the evidence might stand up in court. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff Out presents the Idiot of the Day.
3 women in Waco, Texas say 47-year-old Tony McDaniel was yelling racial slurs and threatening to burn down their house. They apparently didn't even call police when he went home, and then returned with a can of gasoline, splashed it on the side of the house, and lit it. The women doused the flames with buckets of water, but someone did finally call police after seeing McDaniel running down the street on fire because he had splashed himself with gasoline before flicking his lighter. Witnesses pointed out the trailer where McDaniel lives. Officers found the door locked, and when he wouldn't answer their knocks, kicked the door in and dragged him out from under his bed. They took him to a hospital for treatment of minor burns to his hands and then booked him into jail. In other words, he was literally caught red-handed. Now, why? Oh, why? When attempting to torch a house, would you splash some of the gasoline on yourself before you set the home ablaze? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0855. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0855. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, or you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP-FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. I'm Peter's lifelong manservant, Sir Dudley Pidley Havisham Sedgwick Smythe. Peter is such an anal retentive host that it's almost amusing watching him rearrange his desk mid-broadcast. It's like witnessing a martinet trying to polish a ghost.